Coming up is part two, a conversation, an interview with the new CEO of World Vision Australia. His name is Daniel Wordsworth. As we found out the first time around, a Tamworth boy. We won't hold it against him, as I said, because what you've done over the last quarter of a century has been remarkable. You've travelled the world. You've seen the world from a great number of different places. Mm-hmm. You've also understood that there's a tremendous challenge wherever we go, but attitude has been key. Mm-hmm. Attitude is the thing that we need to hold on to, and also the other thing that is so key to good attitude, hope. Mm-hmm. Because it's hope that it gives us the energy to get out of bed in the morning and say, you know what, I've got a challenge, I've got a list of things I've got to make my way and get through. Mm-hmm. And it's with those two things, that drive, that energy, and that hope, that we can get things done. Mm-hmm. Is that what compelled you to come back to Australia after nearly a decade or 12 years in America?
I was in almost 12 years in America, but 10 years really around Asia before that. So I've been away for a long time.
Yeah.
I think what compelled me was this sort of key observation I've made. Right? So I probably sound like a really optimistic guy. I didn't start that way, right? So maybe I've taken that on, but actually it wasn't America that gave me that gift, actually. No, it wasn't America, it was the world that gave me that gift. Yeah. Again, you would think that I've been, if you can think of a dark, scarce place, I've been there or had teams working there. Yeah? So I'm not unaware of what happens in the world. But my observation over decades of being in those places is that the world is actually much better than we think. And it's not just that, we have it great here in Melbourne and those, poor buggers in Congo. It's like, no, actually Congo is surprisingly beautiful and the people are really remarkable. And so what I've learned in this time is some key things. Mm. The world is much better than we think.
Yeah.
People are actually basically good. And then the third thing is you can actually make a difference. Yep, so even in these spots you go into and you think there's nothing that we can do here, actually you realize there's actually there's plenty of things that we can do here. In fact, I can start doing it right now. So why would I come to World Vision Australia? Because right now there is this message going on around the world. The opposite of all the things that I just said. The world's scarce, we can't take people in. People, actually you have to put a big question mark and be suspicious about them. And thirdly, all of us, there's nothing we can do. Let's just leave this to other people. And so I want to say to people, this is just not true. And yet as an Australian, because they think I've got an Australian accent, if I try to make that message in America, and again, I think we think they're all optimistic, but they're not. Yep, they're like us, actually.
Wow.
They're also doubting. Mm. And I stand up and they're like, who are you to sort of talk to us? And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to my own people. I sound more like them and I'm from Australia. And I want to let people know, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through all this stuff. We can make a difference.
You reminded me while you were giving me that explanation of what's brought you back, of, especially from my days in the newsroom, whenever we travelled to different places over the last 30, 40 years, things are never quite as bad as they seem, mm-hmm. never quite as good as they seem. And yet, wherever I went, I was in Armenia filming a couple of years ago, a documentary series, and they are working and living on a pittance, mm-hmm. a pittance. And as you were saying, so rich in their spirit, so generous in their souls, right. And everything they had, they were prepared to share with us.
Exactly.
And I was saying, no, we'll pay. no, you're in our neck of the woods now, yeah? This is our home, or this is our street, or this is our village. Mm-hmm. And they were extraordinary. And I kept sitting there thinking to myself, do you know what? We need to take a good hard look at ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah? We need to hit the reset button. COVID may well be the catalyst for the world to hit the reset button. Lord knows we do need it. But as individuals, there is so much more we can do. So you're back to rekindle some of the mission of World Vision Australia. I remember you touched on some of those grand, was it the 40-hour famine and the tremendous work that they did with the tsunami. There was, you remember, a very compliant Australia that threw millions, many hundreds of millions of dollars to help those people in Indonesia who are not Australian. Yeah?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they did that. And you're right, there is an awful lot of so much that's good. And yet we're so hardwired to bad news. Why do we get it so wrong so often? Yeah? Yeah? And what is the new mission statement? What do you want to do now? You're back. You're based in Melbourne or Sydney? Because this will decide how we accept you.
I'm based here in Melbourne.
Oh, well, you're almost saint-like.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm
So what's the mission statement for 21 and beyond? This is the one that you've got to impart to all the staff. And there are many people involved, and there are many others who have always had a hand, maybe a small hand in World Vision, and go, yeah, you know what? This is the right time. What can we do? What can we do?
Well, right now I just want to first of all assure people, actually we're doing stuff every single day, and thanks to Australian people for doing it. What you may not realize is that during COVID, Australians were at their most generous with us. We actually broke some records in our fundraising from people during COVID. We've seen an increase in the number of people sponsoring children. So actually empathy rose during COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
even though there was so much negativity in the world.
Even though you'd think people are getting bombarded with all of this stuff, and maybe they'd shrink back and isolate, but actually they may have isolated physically, but they didn't isolate their heart. They didn't actually forget about people.
And reflect.
I think they had time to reflect. And you were sitting there going, now I know what it's like to be afraid of disease. Now I know what it's like to be worried that the health system won't last. Now I know how important it is to have government that looks after us and does all of this. That I have access to water and I can wash my hands. These things we're suddenly looking at and realizing so much of the world doesn't have any of these things. And then you think to yourself, what would it be like if you had none of these protections and COVID was coming for you, right? So I think it switches something on. So at World Vision, we've reached 60 million people in the last 12 months around COVID.
That's an extraordinary number.
It really is an extraordinary number in 70 different countries. Yeah, because in many places, we're the last line of defense for those people to protect them from COVID. So as we go into this year, we're ramping up the COVID work that we do. But we can't just be like this about COVID. People are still poor, wars are still going on, refugees are still running, and so we have to be ready there to receive those people and look after them in a way we have for 70 years, and in a way that we've always relied on Australian people to join with us so that we do those things together.
Australia's an island. It affords us a deal of security at a time in the world when people like they're in Europe and everyone's on one another's shoulders, right. and they're feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
You've travelled the world and you've come back to Australia now. As Australians, do we need to be more generous when you look at all the people in the world who have been displaced, who are trying to find a sanctuary, a home, to build a future? Do we have to change, or can we change our minds and look at them a bit differently? Instead of, oh look, they're refugees, they might be bringing this here, their way of thinking, their culture doesn't fit us. Is the Australia of 2021 capable of just tweaking some of the responders and taking in more refugees?
Of course, for a few reasons. One, no, we're Australians, we're like good, we're okay. We're kind, compassionate people that believe in a fair go. So sometimes we might get all this stuff, but in the end I'm just like, no, everyone just take a breath, it's okay, right? We're good here. We've got a lot. This is actually the land of plenty. We can share some of this stuff, yeah? You don't have, I've been in all these spots. They don't want, most of them don't want to come here. They love where they live. That's again an observation. I've never met a refugee in my life that was like, thank goodness for that war, right? I've been dying to get out of that place and I've been hanging out and wanting to, it doesn't happen. They're grieving.